What's up, Falcons Nation? It's your boy Jew coming at you with another Atlanta Falcons video. As always, Falcons Nation, rise up. In today's video, I'd like to talk about what players are currently on the bubble for making this 53-man roster. But if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you know when I've done Atlanta Falcons content or NFL content. If you'd like to follow your boy on Twitter and Instagram, you can follow me at Jew Talk Sports. If you'd like to donate to my channel, you can donate to my Cash App, which is the $ Jew Talk Sports. And if you'd like to be a part of my Jew Talk Sports membership, you can hit that join tab here on the channel as well. But with that being said, let's jump right into the video. So as I mentioned in today's video, I do want to give my thoughts on the current players that may be on the bubble for making this Atlanta Falcons 53-man roster. As you guys know, we do have to cut down to 53 players, this coming Tuesday by 4 p.m. Eastern time. And the first player that I want to start with that I believe is currently on the bubble for making this team is cornerback Natron Brooks. Natron Brooks played in the preseason with our Atlanta Falcons last year, but he really stepped up this year and showed that he's the player that has improved over the last year or two, playing in the NFL as a free agent. And Natron Brooks is one of those guys to me that probably had the best preseason out of all the players on the defensive side of the ball. He really stood out in that Baltimore Ravens second preseason game where he had 13 tackles. He also returned kicks and punts. But he is one of those guys that I really feel like, did put out some really good film as far as being able to make tackles in open space, him playing very sticky coverage and man-to-man coverage, being one of those guys that made plays and was flying around on defense. I definitely could see him possibly either making this 53-man roster or being a guy that makes the practice squad. But he did really stand out in all three preseason games, but especially the last two games, the game against the Baltimore Ravens and the game against Jacksonville. So it just depends on how many corners this Falcons team decides to keep will determine if he makes the 53-man roster or whether he's on this practice squad. But I definitely think that he'll be a part of this Atlanta Falcons organization. Now, the second player that I think is currently on the bubble is running back Carlos Washington. And to me, I would think that Carlos Washington should be the third running back on this 53-man roster, even over a Jace McClellan, who we drafted out of Alabama this season. Personally, I think that Carlos Washington is a guy that's just more prepared to play. He was another guy that was on this Atlanta Falcons team last year. He actually played in the preseason last year as well. And then he was on our practice squad for majority of the year last year. But I definitely think that he's one of those guys that can catch the ball out of the backfield. He did a good job of picking up blitzes and things of that nature. Seems like he grasps the playbook really quickly. And he's a guy that's a one-cut type running back, downhill running back, about 5'10", 220 pounds. But he's definitely one of those guys, I think, behind guys like Bijan, behind guys like Tyler Algier. If, God forbid, one of those guys get nicked up, I really feel like he's more prepared to play than a guy in Jace McClellan, who's a rookie and just trying to get used to the speed of the game and things of that nature. I do think that Jace McClellan also played pretty well in the preseason as well. But I just think that Carlos Washington, he just has the advantage because at this point, he's been in the NFL for a full year. And he's more of a veteran guy over a Jace McClellan. So I would feel more comfortable personally if Bijan or if Tyler Algier somehow goes down. I think that I would be more comfortable relying on a guy like Carlos Washington over a rookie and Jace McClellan. Now, I do think that Jace McClellan still will be on the roster because we drafted him. So he's a guy possibly that we can sneak on the practice squad as well if they end up keeping Carlos Washington and he makes the 53-man roster. Now, the last guy that I want to talk about that I think is on the bubble for this Atlanta Falcons team is wide receiver Chris Blair. Chris Blair played really, really well. To me, he was the best wide receiver during preseason. He goes about 6'2", 190 pounds, 195 pounds. But he's one of those guys that played in the XFL or the UFFL. And he's one of those guys that really played well in the preseason, a big body guy, runs really good routes. And he's a physical wide receiver. He's not a burner. He's similar to like a Drake London in that he uses his body and he has really strong hands. So I definitely think that Chris Blair probably was our best wide receiver during those preseason games, the most consistent wide receiver. Had almost 100 yards receiving in that second preseason game against Baltimore, where he played really well. And then he followed that up in that last preseason game against the Jaguars, where he ran some really good routes. So he's another guy that's kind of a veteran type guy that I think if one of our receivers, God forbid, were to go down, I think that he would be like the fifth wide receiver on this team, fifth or sixth wide receiver on this team, because we have depth at that wide receiver position. But if I were the Falcons, I definitely would try to keep Chris Blair on this team as well, either on the 53-man roster or keeping him on the practice squad as well, because he played really well throughout preseason. And he's one of those guys, like I said, that he's similar to like a Cordero Hodge, similar to a Drake London, a guy who can play on the special teams as well. But he played really, really well in these preseason games, running really crisp routes, catching the football. Outside of the fumble that he had in that first preseason game, he bounced back in the last two preseason games and played really well. So with that being said, you guys give me your thoughts on what players are currently on the bubble. Do you think the three guys that I mentioned, do you think any of these guys make the 53-man roster? If they don't make the roster, I think all three have a chance to make the practice squad. But with that being said, I have a lot more content coming for you guys. If you enjoy my content, hit that subscribe button for your boy. But with that being said, as always, Falcons Nation, rise up, be blessed. Peace.